Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the RMIT Open Day event. My name is Professor Libby Porter, and I'm a member of staff in the Sustainability and Urban Planning team. It's great to have you join us. Thanks very much for coming along. We're really looking forward to talking to you about our programs within the discipline. Next slide, please. I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that we are all located on the unceded sovereign lands of First Nations peoples. I join you from Woiwurrung Wurundjeri country, and I want to recognise Woiwurrung Wurundjeri elders, past and present, leaders emerging, and also to acknowledge country as the life force, the life world that sustains all of us. I want to acknowledge that RMIT conducts its business across many different Indigenous peoples' countries across Australia, particularly as we're located here in Melbourne on Woiwurrung and Bunurong land. I also want to acknowledge, Aidan, if you can go to the next slide, that in our work in sustainability and urban planning, given that we're really interested in the relationship between people and place and how we manage that and what our futures look like, because we're located and in a relationship with unceded sovereignty and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander self-determination, that's really important to us as in the way that we teach our programs and the way that we conduct ourselves. And so I'd like to just make sure that we position what we're talking about this morning in the sort of principle of reconciliation and our commitment and responsibility, myself speaking as a non-Indigenous person, to that law of place, which is what we're all interested in. So to talk to you a little bit more about our programs, if you could go to the next slide, please. We're going to talk to you about our three programs within the discipline of sustainability and urban planning, and they are a degree in environment and society, a double degree in environmental science and environment and society, and a degree program in urban and regional planning with honours. So we'll cover both of those, all three of those aspects today, with a particular emphasis on environment and society and urban and regional planning, and be able to take some questions towards the end. And we also have got set up a little session within another Teams environment that we can all just join if you wish after this event formally closes. If you have some further questions, you might want to speak to myself or other members of staff and some couple of students that we've got as well joining today. If you've got more questions or you just want to have a bit more of a chat with us, I'm thinking someone can put that in the link for that in the Q&A post, Andrew, if you wouldn't mind doing that. So without any further ado, I want to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Ben Cook, who's the Program Manager for the Environment Society and Environmental Science Environment Society double degree. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Libby. Much appreciated, and welcome everyone today. I also want to acknowledge that I'm coming from Wurundjeri country today, on unceded lands, and to recognise elders and ancestors past and present. Really great opportunity to talk about our programs today. So as Libby said, I'm the program manager for Environment Society and a double degree with environmental science. I might just move on to the next slide. So just a little bit of information there about the entry requirements from the previous year. They've remained relatively steady in recent times, so it's a reasonable indicator, though no guarantee of what the entry requirements are going to be, but a rough guide nonetheless. The main thing that is different really is a base level of maths for the double degree with environmental science. Can be any maths, whereas environment society degree is a little bit more open in terms of the prerequisite requirements. That information was all available on our program pages that I think we'll post up as well in the Q&A as the session progresses. Next slide. So this is a little bit of an overview of what you would study if you did the single degree Environment Society. So it's a broad multi-vocational degree program, and the fundamentals really of it are that you are studying and approaching your studies with an understanding that environmental problems are fundamentally social, policy and political problems, right? So to actually affect change in the world, it's not just enough to have the knowledge, but we need to understand how to fundamentally change and affect systems, be it on the inside in a policy-making setting or from the outside as well, in a community advocacy, civil society kind of role. So in order to kind of gain that understanding and that knowledge base, you get a history, I guess, of environmental ideas early on, understanding what ideas are out there about affecting change and understanding the environment and sustainability as a concept. And we get some really strong, broad-based social science understandings, things like global political economy and power and governance, which are fantastic insights into how political structures work. The second year becomes a little bit more topic focused, so we start to drill down more into the specific social science of the environment courses, environmental economics, climate change responses, so not just understanding the science of climate, but how do we affect change in that context too. Environmental systems analysis, so getting a bit of experience with GIS and understanding how those tools and spatial mapping works. Understanding how public policy making works, so what is it to be involved in public policy making, and then how do we respond to public policy in the environment area. And then the third year is a really exciting opportunity to do some really applied things. So a chance to work in a kind of a mock consultancy environment with an external client on a project that they've pitched. So you choose which project you would like to do and you work with an external partner to develop a research project. And we've worked with the Victorian Environment Department, Melbourne Water, local governments, a range of different organisations every year, up to a dozen. So that's a fantastic opportunity. You get to do a work placement as well at an environmental organisation of your choosing. And you get the fantastic opportunity with me as well to do an environmental capstone project, which basically is the chance to take all of your learning and experience, knowledge that you've developed over the degree and apply it in a project that is, again, of your own choosing with a mentor as well. So a chance to really, in that third year, hone the focus of your degree around your interests. Next slide. I won't spend a huge amount more time on this other than to say with the double degree, you get the same things that I've just discussed. And also for those who are interested, you get some environmental science as well. So you get an extra year to work in environmental science. So, fundamentally you're pursuing either a biology or chemistry stream with some of your electives. And students who are interested in working in roles, say in the EPA, for example, environmental lab-based work, or they're just, quite interested in the nuts and bolts environmental science as well as the social dimensions of environment. Those people who are interested in that tend to gravitate towards the double degree. So again, very subtly different entry requirements, but something you might be interested to if you can't split your interests between environmental science and environment society. Next slide. So just a summary of some of the key learning areas that I've mentioned a couple of already. We really get into climate change adaptation and mitigation, what that's about, how we go about it. We really focus on what First Nations sovereignty actually means for environmental management, what's required of a settler colonial state and policymakers to actually engage in these types of issues seriously. We delve into the social, policy and political dimensions of sustainability issues. So what are the actual challenges to affect change? Assessment and planning, environmental related issues. We talk about scale a bit, so what can we do at the local level, community level, engage people, but how do we participate in some of these wider, larger scale, national, global issues as well. We really get into some of the economic and organisational sustainability issues, so we regularly have graduates working in private industry where there's a key, often legislated sustainability role for organisations to take on. We have graduates working in those roles to implement sustainability in an organisational context. We do a lot of really applied environmental project work and management and research work too, because those are fundamental skills regardless of where we might end up with our environment interests down the line. And in the process, you know, we're constantly thinking about critical thinking skills, about communication skills, not just written and not just writing for multiple audiences, but presenting to them too in a range of different formats. So we have a really strong skills and competencies focus too. Next slide. And we do all of this with a range of different partners as well. So as I mentioned before, you know, we've had students working on things like stakeholder analyses of how we might look after grey-haired flying foxes in summertime. So they did a big project with the Environment Department about how you could set up sprinkler systems to care for flying foxes. We have students right now doing placements with Banksia Gardens Community Services, looking at how to integrate a community response around things like urban greening and urban agriculture. So really exciting projects there. Students working on urban greening and urban cooling projects with Melbourne Water. So lots of really exciting things going on. And I also wanted to highlight a really interesting student project, one of those capstone projects I mentioned from the past, where students made a little short film about Reground, which does coffee waste composting and recycling. It was actually aired as part of the Environmental Film Festival a couple of years ago. So really exciting, diverse opportunities to get involved with. Next slide. Many and varied career outcomes. So one thing I did mention before is we are a kind of multi-vocational degree, so people can kind of go in a range of different directions within the environment sector depending on their interests. So policy officer role, sustainability management, sustainability education, waste, waterways, green space, climate adaptation, all of these types of areas are valuable opportunities. That's particularly with the single degree I'm talking about. Those things are very present too with a double degree, as well as things like, as I mentioned, roles in the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and other roles that involve a little bit more kind of lab-based technical environmental science work. But with a single degree in particular, you know, we've very recently been accredited by the peak professional environment body in Australia, the Environment Institute of Australia and New Zealand, as an accredited program, one of only 2 in Australia. So basically saying that we acknowledge, we see that what your program does is deliver a really important service both to the community but to the environment sector, and produces graduates that are really well prepared to work and or contribute in that space. Next slide. A little alumni profile here. I won't keep it up too long because we've got a reasonable pace to set, but just wanted to give you a bit of a sense of some of the things that our graduates are doing. So Talia here is involved in was involved in the single degree. She's a project manager working on a big global monitoring project around restoration, so ecological restoration. She has recently also started to do a master's degree as well, so she's really interested in pursuing some further studies. But she's working on this global evergreening alliance, looking at monitoring and developing restorations opportunities globally. And she's really, she really feels like that role that she's currently involved in has benefited from the fact that the degree program really looked at how environment issues are fundamentally human issues as well, and we need to understand those when thinking about how we do landscape restoration work, for example. Next slide. I've got Daniel here as well, who did the double degree. He's working in Canberra. He's a graduate policy officer in the Department of Agriculture, working particularly on waterway issues and water and environmental issues as well. Does a bit of work with the CSIRO, and has previously also worked a little bit with Parks Victoria. So Daniel was very interested in the kind of more conservation land management stuff. So that's really, the degree has really allowed him to pursue those interests. And we're also fortunate to have a real life in-person student as well, which is not just a photo on a page. Very lucky to have a final year student, Alex Lynham here, who's going to just jump in and give us a bit of a sense of what some of her really enjoyable, engaging experiences of the program have been, and perhaps some highlights in terms of some of the learning experiences. So thanks so much, Alex, for popping along, and over to you.
All right. also it's yeah, I'm in the final year of the Bachelor of Environment and Society. I actually switched to this course. I was originally studying to be a historian, and then I kind of had this realization that I wanted to do something practical and applied and community orientated, and this course just really provided all of those things. So at the moment, I'm working on my capstone subject that Ben talked about before. I'm doing a report on eco-nationalism in European politics, which is really interesting, and I feel really kind of encapsulates this degree, that you're looking at environmental problems, but you're also bringing in this social sciences element. I think what I really enjoyed about this degree is it has given me a really good base knowledge of a range of environmental issues. It's very, like, you learn very quickly a really good like ground knowledge of kind of these concepts about like ecology and climate change in a way that's still easy to digest if you don't have a scientific background like me. And, you know, I feel like I'm really able to participate in all kinds of debates about environmentalism, not just from a management perspective, but also from kind of a more conceptual perspective as well.
Fabulous. Thank you, Alex. Much appreciated. And Alex will be hanging around a little bit afterwards as well for the Q&A. So a chance that if you have any questions about Alex's experience of the degree, she's happy to answer them. So thanks so much.
That's all right. I'm going to answer questions anyone has. So, yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you. And of course, we'll be hanging around as well afterwards if you have any questions that you have for me about the environment degrees. But I'm going to hand back to our wonderful chair, Libby, now, who's going to talk about the Urban and Regional Planning Program.
Thank you, Ben. Great overview, and thanks, Alex, for joining us too and being able to speak about the value of those wonderful programs. I want to talk now about our Urban and Regional Planning Program, which is a 4-year honours program. Yes, just to outline, of course, the prerequisites based and the ATAR that was last year's entry. So that gives you a bit of a sense of what the entry requirements are. So obviously successful completion of something equivalent to the VCE here, and at least a study score of 30 in English, or at least 25 if you're doing one of the other English as another language variations. If you could move on to the next slide, thanks, Aidan. Our program structure is, as I said, across 4 years. In this, you'll notice quite a lot of shared courses that you would take along with the environment and society students. So you get to I think across our discipline, have a really strong sense of the community between environment, society and the double degree, and also urban and regional planning, because you do take a few common courses, particularly in year 1. Probably the best way to think about our program is that the first year is really a foundation year. It's about setting up for you the kind of core conceptual ideas and ways of thinking that we take through the rest of the more specialised aspects of the planning program. So in the first year you cover broad aspects of how to think about what our society looks like, where it comes from, how we situate it in kind of global contexts, including a global political economy, of course. We look at very carefully at what are the ecological foundations of planning, and look at systems, ecological systems, and how they should be informing planning interventions. Obviously the history of planning itself as a practice and profession, how cities work, and how we might manage cities through sort of strategic urban planning, issues of power. All of these things are important kind of foundational concepts that really underpin all of the rest of the learning that you do throughout the rest of the degree program. In the second year and the third year, we're very much focusing in on the specific kind of core content, really, of what it takes to be a practicing urban or regional planner. And obviously that covers a very broad range of sectors and issues and challenges in our contemporary world. Everything from doing social planning, how should we manage housing and community services and schools and building and community development kind kinds of aspects of our life, through to what makes good policy, how we manage environmental systems, what the sort of regulatory aspects of planning are, and of course urban design, which is a really important aspect of that sort of spatial element and the relationship between people and place, and how we move around in place, how we connect with each other, where jobs are offered. All of those things, are really very much part of those courses. And again, in the third year, we sort of develop that a little bit further, and take some more advanced thinking around the statutory elements of planning, around how we manage our responses to climate change. You do some really important focused work on aspects like transport planning, how governance works, how we situate planning as a sort of policy tool and a set of strategic kinds of interventions and decisions within a broader governance kind of framework, how that works. And of course, looking at theories of urban planning as well. So those second and third years sort of think about as the sort of core content and skill set of planning, which is very diverse. And then in the fourth year, you could sort of think of the fourth year really as the capstone year. It's where you do the required planning work placement, which we basically organised for you, but we sort of simulate it as a job prospects and advertising and application process. So it feels very kind of real life in many respects. And you take a professional practice and ethics course alongside that placement to help you think about what is it that you're doing in practice, and learning with that understanding of what it's like to work in a real live planning environment. And you also do capstone projects. You can split, we split the cohort between two streams. You have a choice to take either an applied planning project, which you work on in groups, or you take the thesis stream where you develop an individual piece of research that looks much more like a kind of a traditional sort of honours degree, if you like. But both those streams come out with you. We all graduate if you do all 4 years of the program with an honours degree. It doesn't matter whether you take the thesis or the project stream for that. So you can very much think of it as foundation year in year 1, core skills and competencies and knowledge areas in years 2 and 3, and then capstone with the work placement and research projects in year 4, and of course capacity to take university electives as well throughout the program in various different ways. So that gives you a bit of an overview of what the urban and regional planning program looks like. Aidan, if you could just go on to the next slide, that would be great. And you should have heard, I think, there's some of the kind of key themes that we are addressing in our program. And just to kind of pick up on a few different things, obviously where planning is really all about the relationship between people and place, but also thinking about how we manage into the future. What should our future societies look like, and how should they function, and how can we develop those in a much more sustainable and equitable way, with core principles of social and ecological justice right at the heart of how we think about cities, urban places, regional and rural communities, all of those kinds of aspects. So housing is obviously important, movement and mobility and transport, energy and climate kinds of politics, cultures and communities. How do we live in spaces? How do we enliven spaces to make them good to be in, and where we can connect with each other, even in these really difficult COVID times. These things are still very much matters at the heart of urban planning. And how do we think all of that spatially? So the visual representations and thinking about those spatial relationships, how people move across place, and how we should do so in the future, are very much at the heart of what urban and regional planners do. So I'm going to just break from my talking about the program for a moment, because we have on the line, much as Ben did for the other programs, a student who's a current student in her 4th year from the Urban and Regional Planning degree, India Brown, and she has to leave at about past. So I just wanted to throw to her to give her a chance to talk to you about what it's like to be a student in the Urban and Regional Planning program, and give you a sense of the highlights from a student perspective. Over to you, India, if you can talk.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm all good. I'm flexible with time, Libby, just so you know. In regards to urban planning, where to begin? I was a year 12 who didn't really have any idea what they wanted to do, but was very passionate about, I guess, the landscapes around me. I have kind of an interesting background. I'm originally from regional Victoria, but spent all of my life growing up in one of the most urbanized countries on the planet, COVID-19, or Singapore, sorry. So throughout my time at RMIT, I have learnt so much about the way that cities and politics and the environmental background all kind of coming together to create this amazing degree. I've learnt that we have a very creative role, much to as what Libby said, that in terms of our future, we have this almost like legacy-like job where the things that we come across in the workplace, in terms of what you approve and that they have the ability to stay there long term. So it's very much a legacy. Currently, I am in my 4th year at RMIT, and I actually am going through the process of writing a thesis. So it seems a really daunting task, but the most amazing thing I think about the degree is that it gives you the scope to do a thesis, but also to focus on your interests. So a big part of that for me, coming from regional Victoria, was being able to work closely with an expert in regional planning here at RMIT, and to look at how bushfires are growing and how they impact these communities. And I think another fantastic thing about this degree that you can't beat is the opportunity to undergo professional placement. So, and I'm currently working for Ararat Rural City Council, where I have so much exposure to a whole variety of different planning phenomenons that I think really are just amazing in terms of the things you can learn from them as a person, but also how you can help the community and other people around you very much so.
Fantastic, India. Thank you so much for giving us your perspective. It's wonderful to have you join, and if you are able to hang around for a wee bit longer, that would be great to keep you on the line in case people have questions that are best answered from a student perspective. That's great, but if you have to leave, no problem as well. So as India was really talking about, we cover so many aspects of environments and planning issues in our program. I've just put a few little snippets of some applied projects that students finished, I think it was last year, and just to give you a little bit of a taste of what they kind of look like and the different kinds of things that students are focused on. So obviously we're really interested in questions of housing and housing affordability and housing justice and equity, and one group of students in the Going Tiny project had a look at tiny homes and whether they, as the kind of revolution in tiny homes, might be able to address housing need, and did a whole range of different kinds of methods. I think they surveyed people and they looked at different kinds of planning schemes and how the policy affects whether you can build or put tiny houses in particular kinds of locations, and what effect that might have on people's access to affordable housing. The one in the middle, which I love the title of, "You're just a bunch of middle-class zucchinis," was all about the barriers and enablers towards urban agriculture to address food insecurity, which we know, particularly under climate change, is a growing problem for people to access really good sources of food that are locally grown and sustainable. And here you can begin to see some really strong overlaps and resonances with our environment and society students as well. We're interested in planning in similar kinds of issues, but we're interested in very much how the systems of planning and the structures and policies of planning operate to either close down or open up these possibilities to build more just and sustainable worlds. And the third one there was really about transport and car dependency, and whether COVID has changed people's patterns of moving and how they're choosing to move around, what forms of transport choices they're kind of making. And so you can begin to see some of the breadth of issues and challenges and really fascinating issues that we engage in the planning degree. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of some of the career outcomes, obviously the word planner appears very frequently here because that's where we're driving towards. But of course, it's really hard to kind of actually describe the diversity of a planning career or its possibility as a really diverse set of outcomes for people, because we tend to get kind of hooked on the term planner. What does it really mean? But just to say that the possibilities for when you come out of your degree are really, really diverse. Our graduates work across all levels of government, in private sector, increasingly in non-government kinds of organisations and community development and community service organisations, because planners are all about using their skill set to try and think through how we can produce better worlds in the future, and what they might look like, and what are the policy and regulatory mechanisms that we need to use to do that. And so we have, there are obviously the sort of, if you like, the sort of conventional forms of jobs that people go into around statutory planning and strategic planning. So statutory planning, much more regulatory, development approvals and managing development applications within a local area, and strategic planning, that much more sort of forecasted longer term visions and ideas about places and how people will relate to places in the future. But of course, you know, much wider than that as well, around social planning. We've talked about that a little bit, housing and things like that. Transport planning, of course. Some of our students go on to do urban design, often taking a master's degree in urban design to really enhance and develop their skills in that area. A lot of our students move into environmental management as well, environmental policy, either in protected area systems kinds of policy areas, or in other, say, energy planning is a growing kind of area of interest. So a really diverse sort of career possibility for our students and graduates. If you could move on, thanks, Aidan. And just to give you a sense of what that looks like in reality, I've got a couple of profiles for you of our previous graduates. First, Bridget Salmon, who's was a graduate of our program a few years ago. She's now a senior policy advisor in the Victorian Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, and her role is very much about strategic analysis of land and how we manage public land, basically government land, into the future. What are the best case scenarios for that government land? How could it be utilised to best purposes in land provision? How do we maximise the best kind of value? So thinking about what land is, and thinking of land as a kind of really important public resource, if you like, particularly under climate change, and how we might think about that 20, 50, 70, 100 years into the future is very much part of Bridget's role, and she very much enjoys doing it, I believe. If you go on to the next profile there, thanks. And also one of our graduates who's not the same Ben Cook that you just heard from, but is a different Ben Cook, spelt the same way though, who graduated from our program and also took a Bachelor of Landscape Architecture a few years ago. He's now an associate with Tract Consultants, so he works in the private sector. And Tract Consultants do a whole range of different kinds of projects around planning and landscape architecture. I think Ben also works quite a bit in the urban design and 3D media work around landscape, because he's very much bringing his landscape skills into play there, and likes to talk about the fact that his planning background gives him this really important set of skills around project coordination, doing strategic planning reviews, and running workshops lots of times for people to think about their city spaces and how they want to manage them. So that gives you a little bit of an insight into the Urban and Regional Planning Program. Just go on to the next slide there. Thanks, Aidan. And just to say, all three of our programs have, really applied forms of learning and obviously industry experience itself. So in the urban and regional planning program, you take the work placement, that's a sort of intrinsic part of that 4th capstone year, and in the environment and society programs and double degree, you're also working, there's possibilities for placements and doing work with industry and community partners. We often do things like project competitions that are either external to us, and we encourage our students to get involved in those, and they're often judged by and led by leading experts in other fields. Some of them are global. In fact, we had one set of projects earlier this year in first semester doing some really interesting work, judged across a set of global teams, which was fantastic. And sometimes they're internal as well. All of our programs have various kinds of field trips and studio work, and we're often bringing industry presenters into the classroom to talk to you about how we apply your knowledge, how you will apply your knowledge in real life kind of situations and in real contexts where obviously the concepts and theories are fine in theory, but what does it look like when the rubber hits the road in real life contexts. And of course, you've got the opportunity to join the relevant professional institutes, including the Planning Institute of Australia. All of our degrees are accredited. And participate in the various networking events and social events that are run by those professional institutes. Within the urban and regional planning program, you can become a student member, and there's a way of kind of getting involved in the Young Planners Network, and they run all sorts of interesting events. So you're already, when you join the degree, you're already participating in the profession itself, learning about how people get together, learning about how the industry itself actually works. We think that's a really important part of our programs. Ben, did you want to say anything just there from an environment society perspective on professional institutes and those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Libby. As I mentioned before, the Bachelor of Environment Society is accredited by EIANZ, the Environment Institute of Australia and New Zealand, which is basically an acknowledgement that the degree provides a real platform and opportunity to work on the types of issues that we cover in the course within the environment sector itself. So kind of a validation of the fact that, you know, there is an opportunity and a pathway there through the degree to work in an area of the environment sector that really deals with the fundamental underlying challenges of affecting change, and that acknowledges the fact that environmental issues are often around, there's a knowledge dimension to them. We have to know what the sustainability issue is if we're going to address it, but it's not just about having the knowledge. And our knowledge of climate impacts perhaps is a good example of that. It's one thing to know what those impacts might be. It's another thing to actually affect substantive change in that kind of area, whether it's from a local to a global scale. And once you graduate too, you have the opportunity to join EIANZ as an individual professional member as well, which provides a range of opportunities to professional development, in a number of different kind of sector areas, whether it's energy or water or waste. And look, the other thing I suppose we like to think of too is that we try to maintain pretty strong connections through the program with our alumni. So one thing that you'll benefit from in terms of your experience of the degree is your exposure to past graduates as well. So what are they doing? What types of things are they involved in? In what ways can they give back to the program and support current students as well? So we're quite well connected with the kind of broad range of industry areas that sit within the environment sector. We have representatives from different parts of the environment sector that sit on an advisory panel that helps us to inform changes and updates to our degree, so it remains current and engaged in what's happening in the world. And you will also find too that the people who are teaching you are very engaged in what's happening in the world too, with lots of very interesting research experiences and a whole range of professional experiences prior to their their roles at universities as well. So a really kind of diverse engagement with the topics at hand from a range of different people. Thanks, Libby.
Thanks, Aidan, if you could just move on to the next slide. Just to talk briefly about global opportunities, which feels like a strange thing to be talking about in our current environment, given that we are struggling to get outside our 5 kilometres, much less out into the world. We do have some global opportunities. RMIT has partnerships around the world with different kinds of universities, and in our programs actually themselves, we usually run and hope to certainly next year to run study trips in and which you can take as electives basically to different parts of the world. I think we've been to most recently Vietnam, in particular Cambodia, I think in previous years, Barcelona and other parts of Europe. So we're trying all the time to position your degree program, your learning, but also your future career prospects in a much more global context. If you can move on to the next slide. Thank you. And just to remind you that there's the possibility of taking the VCE extension studies if you are at a relevant point in your own high school learning. You can study university subjects during year 12 and get a kind of equivalent. You get a kind of credit when you arrive. So we have 2 courses that are available for that. They're available as VCE extension studies courses, and you don't pay any fees for those. One's called the Urban Age and the other one is Sustainable Futures. Feel free to ask us any more questions there, and there's a link and a contact there to Claudia that you can ask some more questions of if you... Slide, thanks. And we also have the early offer program, but only in the Bachelor of Environment and Society. So some information up here about how that works, where you can secure a place through the early offer program. Ben, was there anything in particular that you wanted to mention here, or is this info sufficient?
Yeah, thanks, Libby. This is one that that basically it's going to depend on a range of different factors whether it's relevant for you. So it's kind of more an individual assessment in terms of whether you think that you would be a relevant applicant for this. The best thing to do really is to just jump on the RMIT website if you think this might apply to you. And search for RMIT early offers, and the RMIT early offer portal will pop up. There's a chance to submit your application there. It's basically a chance to kind of apply prior to the normal VCAT, VTAC, VCAT, something entirely different. Application round based on your own personal application. So jump on the RMIT website and have a look. It might not be relevant to you, but it also might be something that's a possibility. Thanks, Libby.
Great, thanks. Thanks so much, Ben. I think I've just dropped out there for a moment. Apologies if that interrupted anything. Just go to the next slide. Thanks, Aidan. And we'll wrap things up for you and get to your questions. I know Andrew's been answering some of them in the Q&A for you already. Just to remind you of a couple of key dates for next year. This is what the semesters look like. We kick off O Week towards the end of Feb, and then the semester 1 starts right at the end of February, or usually the sort of first week of March is how we think about it. And then the semester 2 dates are there as well, in case that's useful to you. For now, though, we can, I think, go to some questions. I know Andrew's been answering a few things in the chat, and we've offered you some links and those kinds of things in the chat, but if there's something in particular that you want me to pick up on here, we can do that now. And you can go to the next slide. Thanks, Aidan. I did see one around for students who are doing VCE, what subjects would you suggest, not as prerequisites, obviously, but just for interest? I know Andrew's answered it there, but I think it's worthwhile mentioning just a couple of things. Yeah, often, you know, the really cognate discipline for all of us is geography. So that's a good one. If you enjoy geography, then you're probably going to enjoy some aspects of our programs, or all aspects of our programs. But yes, all those other economics, also politics, environmental studies, biology are all very relevant, but as is any of the broader humanities and social science kinds of subjects that you might be taking at VCE level as well, are all relevant too. I can see someone's saying to me there are no outstanding questions for us to answer, which is great to hear. That must mean we've covered everything for you, which is terrific.
Libby, I'm happy to jump in. I just noticed there's been a couple of general questions about electives from a range of different people. I think probably interested in a number of different programs. So just to start off there, so the Environment and Society degree has what's called a program elective in the first year, which means we give you a list of courses, and you can pick one that's of the most interest, including a language unit if you would like to do it. And then the remainder of the degree program has three what are called university electives, which basically means you can choose any class from anywhere in the university. And in fact, actually, there's another university too, if you find something that's really interesting that RMIT doesn't offer. And you can, and that they are in the second and third year. You can do, you know, effectively 4 language courses if you want, using all of your electives. So you can do a language, effectively a language minor through those 4 courses, or you can basically study anything at all, something that you think might be, you know, in addition to the kind of knowledge area that you're already building up through the degree program, or something entirely different. You might want to do a bit of pottery. You might want to do something, you know, that's kind of a little bit different, and a chance to kind of expand your horizons a bit. So with the double degree, because you're doing effectively 2 bachelors in the 4 years, it's a bit of a squeeze. So you've only got 1 elective there. Some students in the past have used that as an opportunity to do one of the study tours that Libby mentioned before. So the study tours usually, in most cases, count as 1 course. So, you know, not only do you get the experience of having a really fun and engaging and exciting study tour with a range of different people, fingers crossed, of course, then you're doing a course as well. So you have that opportunity with the single elective in the double degree, or you, again, you know, bit of calligraphy if you like, to mix it up. You can do something entirely different as well.
You can also, sorry Ben, I did my work placement through an overseas kind of experience. It was online because of COVID, but I did my work placement virtually through an organisation in Indonesia, and it was really great. I had a great time. It was really interesting to see another kind of culture of working, and that's also another way which you can get a global experience and also use your electives. And sorry, that's my cat. You can hear him.
Absolutely, and there's Study Indonesia opportunities which continue online around sustainable agriculture or sustainable tourism, for example, are good opportunities that still exist and are still continuing, and allow you to do you know, some of your work experience stuff and some electives as well. So that's a great opportunity. And Libby, I think it's 4 electives for the planning program as well.
Yeah, that's right. 4 electives in the planning program, and I'll just before I get to a question in the chat, India, is there anything you'd like to say about electives? Was there a particular set of strategy that you took with electives, and what did you find most interesting? Maybe other people would like to hear.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's unmuted just yet.
No, you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. So in terms of electives, there was such a broad ability, I guess you could say, about what you can undertake. I think the approach I took to it was very much my passion is in regional issues that face regional areas, but I also wanted to expand my skills with some GIS sort of technology, and I just completely out of interest, as I loved geography at school. So I did a couple of GIS subjects, which were harder than I thought they would be, but were also really rewarding in terms of what you can produce through the hard work. They feel like forever ago, the electives, now that you come to the fourth year. But it was really awesome. I did a psychology course because I don't know if anyone's heard of Jan Gehl, but he's one of the most famous kind of urban designers, urban planner, architect in the history of urban planning. And he actually married a psychologist. So I was like, oh, Jan Gehl, I'll do a psychology subject. And, so just things like that I really tried to broaden my knowledge around different things, because planning is so multi-dimensional, I guess you could say. There are so many influencing and impacting factors, and as Libby and Ben have said, that you really see how environment, politics and planning all cross over. So I was like, okay, we'll throw in a psychology subject and mix it up and see what happens. But it was a really fantastic opportunity because unlike electives in high school, I did high school overseas, so a bit different to here. They're quite constrained in terms of what you can do, but university, it really gives you that ability to find where your passion is and to hone it through different elective subjects, if that helps.
Perfect. Thanks so much, India. It's great to hear just a direct lived experience of choosing electives, I think, for people to get a bit of a sense of. Really appreciate it. Thank you. There's a question in the chat about similarities between urban planning and architecture design, which is one we get asked quite a lot. And yes, of course, there are lots of similarities because we're interested in broad issues around the built environment, if you like. So that's a kind of shared common sense of purpose between planning and architecture design. If you like, probably the best way to think about the difference between those is that certainly architecture is very much focused on individual buildings, and urban design often in the connections between buildings and the way that the broader built environment works. And planning is really about the sort of social, political and environmental, ecological context in which all of that is happening, and the built environment is kind of produced through that. So architects are very much focused on how to build a building, and planners are very much focused on why build that building, does it serve a useful purpose for us, and what will it be used for. So those are the kinds of differences between those things. There's a question as well about experience and how to address that in an application for the early entry program. Maybe we could just go back 2 slides, Aidan, to that slide that has the info on that. Just to remind you again. So yeah, just that one there. Perfect. Thank you. So as you can see here, you're assessed on these different categories, and you need to meet 2 out of these 5 categories. You don't have to cover all of them. So I would focus in on what you think you've got the best experience in, that you really want to tell us about, and provide some evidence about what that was like and how you've kind of used it. And that's really, I guess, what we're looking for in that. Hope that answers that question a little for you. I can't see any other questions popping up in the Q&A section here, which is absolutely fine. It has been great to join you for this session and to have you with us. We really appreciate you coming along. We will join the, Andrew, maybe you can just put it in the Q&A again. Thank you, yes, to join us for a little bit more of a one-on-one, slightly less formal, where you can just chat to us about any questions you've got or things you want to check out a little bit more that we perhaps didn't cover quite sufficiently for you. The link is there that Andrew's just posted in the chat. That'll take you to a different Teams room. But for now, we might draw this one to a close. Just want to thank Ben in particular, and also our wonderful students, India and Alex, for joining us. Also to Andrew for doing the chat moderation there, and to Aidan and Jen for helping out in the background. Thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and hope to see you at RMIT next year or in the future. Bye for now.